yeah, so my name is Miguel Hernandez. Today we'll be talking about comics and graphic design. As Spike said, I met Henry. I'm trying to remember how many years ago that was. It was a couple years ago, and we met by I needed some copies done of some comics, and we just got started talking about the design work and the overall look of the books and the illustration. And Henry gave me a lot of insight on paper, and from there it kind of sparked on from one thing to the next. And I've been really getting more into comics and graphic design a lot more ever since. So just introduction. So I have a company called Studio JS. Right now we mainly focus on comics and graphic design. We do a lot of illustration. Most of our work does usually consist of graphic design or making logos for companies. Also designing things like what I've been doing a lot lately in the past 2 years is storyboarding, whether it be for companies that are trying to sell their services to another company, or companies that want to, appeal to a certain audience and they kind of want like some advice. So I run the company with my sister. So we basically we have our own projects now. So the project I'm working on now, which is a book called Jisei. So it's a graphic novel manga series. The character you see right here is Hanzo. That's a comic series we've had for a very long time. I kind of started the company with his books, and then I'll be working on something later called Nero Zero. So here's a quick look at, this is just a snapshot of my website. This is just some of the work that I've done for just illustration work. And this is also, I have one of my, so this was a comic I did for the Scene magazine for their annual comics issue about 2 years ago. And it just kind of highlights what my life is like as a comic book artist. And since I have a family with children, most of my work is done at night. So basically the joke, we met at the art museum and we discussed what we were going to do for our comics. So the plan was that our comics would run into each other as one single story. So mine just talked about, just being a comic artist and kind of making a little jab at people that make comics, like how are you going to survive and that kind of thing. And it's a bad career. You're not going to make any money. So the comic was basically a little jab about that. So next, here's my sister's work. My sister, she dabs in more than just the graphic design. My sister does a lot of, she makes her own clay figurines, and we bring these to shows. And sometimes we kind of rage war with each other when we have conventions, because some conventions she'll sell like crazy. Like she'll sell the little clay figurines and the little cute pictures and like the characters, and I may sell a comic or two, and then we'll have a different convention where I'll sell a lot of comics and she might sell like one or two things. So it's kind of funny, but she always made this kind of stuff, and it helps because my sister, she helps me think a little bit differently sometimes when it comes to what books we're working on, what projects we're working on. So it's definitely good to have her with me. My next slide. So just a little bit about making comics. I'm not trying to bore you all, but just to kind of give you a look into what we do. So this, what you're looking at now, is after I come up with an idea, as far as my process, this would be the thumbnails. So when we're designing a comic, I try to look at the overall project. I try to design every single page. And I also try to get a lot of the difficult work out of the way. So that means like, space and time and action and how panels run with each other. I noticed that a lot of some artists I know are not thumbnailing enough, and they're not working on their comics beforehand. So this is something that I take very serious. It takes me actually longer to do this step than any other step in the comic making process. And the next step would be, there's my slide, it was wrong. So this would be the basic comic making process for us. We start with like our ideas, we go to thumbnails. From thumbnails, we go to rough pencils. then to inks, then to tones and color. And then from there, we go to dialogue and edit. And then the end would be book design, which is where the graphic design part comes in. But we'll talk about that at the end. So Spike and I got to talking, and we talked about what programs I use. And one of the things that I told him was that I do a lot of my work now because I got kids running around everywhere on the iPad Pro. A lot of my rough pencils, my thumbnail sketches are done via iPad Pro. I use a program for penciling called Procreate, and basically allows me to, I start up the program and I can literally just go right in and start my pencil work. The iPad Pro to me was just a no-brainer. I used to be a tech at Apple, and when they came out with this, I saw the Apple Pencil and I was done. I was like, oh, I gotta have this. And I got it. I did not use it at first. I kind of just used it for like Netflix and watching videos. And then one day I finally was like, let me give it a try. I highly recommend it to anyone who is trying to, work. If you're on the go a lot, or if you're not always in your office space or in your studio space, I recommend it because it's light. The programs on it are very, very, very well done compared to when it first started. I mean, we were just talking about the Adobe suite, but I keep hearing things about Affinity. So I might even actually try giving Affinity a shot now, because a lot of the stuff we design is either with Illustrator or InDesign or Photoshop. But I'm hearing Affinity, we're giving a thumbs up. I'm hearing Affinity is a little bit better. And honestly, I don't mind the price of Affinity. So, paying one time. Also, I use another program called Procreate and Clip Studio. And Clip Studio is a program from Japan. And it was used for Japanese artists in Japan. They brought it to America. And now a lot of American comic artists are using it. And it's a phenomenal program.
Before you move on, Miguel, let me instigate. That might be the polite word for it.
Sure.
So tell me what you think of your your Cintiq drawing tablet, because I know there's a couple of people here that have one. So I wanted to instigate some conversations or arguments maybe.
I don't too much have a problem with the Cintiq. I do have one. I bought the 13-inch HD about a year or two when it first came out. I used it for a long time. It was my workhorse for about maybe 8 years. But I always would get annoyed with the latency was always a little off. And no offense to anybody who's a non-traditional artist, but if you're traditionally trained like I am, you just know that latency is there. You feel it. And there definitely was a latency. And I also would have trouble with sometimes because I like to be very precise with my line work. And I would notice that it might be like a millimeter off from where I was, from the line that was being created, from where my pen was being placed on the Cintiq. And when I worked at Apple and they brought out the iPad Pro and we tried the Apple Pencil, no latency. Where I put down the Apple Pencil, it made a mark. And after that point, I was sold. Sad thing is that my Cintiq has been sitting in the drawer now for about 5 years going on. So I haven't used it that much since. So I might actually want to look to donate that at some point, or unless my iPad dies. But I think Cintiq is great. I do think they kind of have some catching up to do now. And then I know that they're Windows based, which is, that's all good. It's no big deal with that. But I don't think that latency it's not there yet for some reason. I haven't tried the new ones yet, so I can't say anything about that. I know they just released a new one, but from what
I just wanted to instigate a little bit. So yeah. Sorry to digress you from your.
It's a phenomenal point because it does come up sometimes. You can get a lot done on the iPad Pro. I will say that, and I'm going to keep talking about the iPad Pro because the things I'll be showing you. For example, like I said, this is done in iPad. This is done on the iPad Pro on the program Procreate. I think I also brought up another slide, but basically this would be like a rough draft of these are my rough pencils. What I usually do is I make my rough pencils in Procreate. I then take I have a Epson Workforce 1750, and it prints up to 13 by 19. And I take 11 by 17 Bristol board paper. Oh, there's a line. I didn't do that, did I? Who's doing that?
That's Henry being a vandal, I think.
I'm like, there's a lie. But I take it and I print it on 11 by 17 paper. And I then go over that with ink. I don't usually do any more pencils from there. So this is actually a screenshot of Procreate. And this is why I like Procreate, because it's a very simple interface. If anybody's ever wanted to use it, give it a shot. The app itself is only like $8. But as you can see, the interface is very simple. You have the two tabs on the one side here. One is for zoom. The other one, one is for the brush size. Look at me, I'm forgetting what the other one's. Oh, one's for opacity and the other one's for brush size. And then up at the top, you have your brush, whatever you pick, your smudge tool, your eraser, and your layers. And then you can, you also have new settings that they've added throughout the years, and that'll be next to gallery where you see the wrench and the magic wand tool. So here is a drawing. One thing that I like about Procreate is it does what's called a time lapse. So you can actually it records your drawing for you. So if anybody, we're in the age of sharing a lot now with social media. So now a lot of artists are taking their drawings and they're doing time lapses of them with Procreate. And then Procreate, knowing that people use Instagram, they've made it so you get, I think, 30-second to 1-minute clips of your drawings, and that can be put online. So people can, go back and watch it. The good thing is that the files themselves are not large. They're like maybe a couple megabytes. So it's not going to take up a huge amount of space if you try to export it. So that's why I recommend people try Procreate. It saves your process.
How long did it take you to draw that one image you just had there? Like,
this one took me to do the full painting digitally. It took me about maybe an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half. I work pretty fast. I'm also, when I was painting traditionally, I was a messy painter. So it would take me a lot longer, which is why I like Procreate, because the brushes that they have behave a lot like traditional mediums. So if you have traditional training, you will kind of know how to play around with the settings a bit and kind of get the look and feel of a real painting that you want.
Yeah, not everybody here was at the last month's meeting, but the last meeting we did was on the iPad and art on the iPad. So so Procreate was a good part of that program.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal app, and they're a very small team. So the cool thing is that if you have an issue or problem, they usually listen to what you have to say. If you have a message, not a message, if you have an issue, you can email the support team, or like the people that use the app will do it. So here are the actual inks. This is just what I scan the inks from my actual from when I work on them with ink. And then on the right, next to it, you'll see when I add tones, and the tones are added with Clip Studio, which is the program that I use on the iPad Pro also, and it's also a desktop program. So I literally just scan them at 600 DPI, and then I put them I import the images into the program, and at that point, I add the tones or color. It depends on what kind of illustration I'm working on. And then this is basically a screenshot of what Clip Studio looks like on the iPad. The cool thing about Clip Studio, Adobe, is they were able to take the whole app, that's the desktop version of the app, and put it on the iPad itself. So you don't have any difference in the app that you use on your computer or your PC than what you would be using on the iPad.
It's 100% identical?
It's 100% the same. There's literally no difference.
Yeah, that's kind of rare, I think.
Yeah, there's no difference. I when they did it, it was kind of like, at first I didn't believe it was true, but I got it. Only downside to it is that it is subscription based. I wish it wasn't, because I already paid for the desktop version, so it's like $8 a month. the other cool thing is about is that it integrates. They have their own cloud system. It works really great. So if I'm working on a comic, I save it to the cloud, or I'm working on a cloud, and then when I get home, I can literally upload it from the cloud and finish what I'm doing on my computer. So I definitely recommend this. Also, the inking tools on this app are phenomenal.
Do you
Um,
like start the stuff on your iPad and finish it on your Mac, or do you like start it on your Mac and finish it on your iPad? Is there
Sometimes, mainly just I mainly do most of my work traditionally first and then scan it. The only time I'll come back with Clip Studios to add like some additional inking lines. I know my sister is pretty much all digital, so my sister Michelle will pretty much do all her inking and penciling and everything in the app itself. She doesn't usually go back and forth. She usually stays all on the iPad. And she's been using Procreate, so she's making a full book now in Procreate, and it looks phenomenal.
you don't
Um,
have fights about who's doing it better?
no, no, we don't fight about that. We
Right.
never fight about that. No, we fight about other stuff like, did you put the file in the drive, or you forgot to proofread this and that kind of stuff. So now we're on Adobe. So when it comes to graphic design, I get to use a little bit of my graphic design skills when it comes to adding the dialogue for comics. So this is where I downloaded a template from a comic letterer that's digital named Nate Picos. He has, I think it's Picos or Picos, but he has a site called Blambot, and that's where you can buy a lot of the comic book typefaces. So if you want that comic book typeface look, that's purely what he designs. He also makes templates, but this is where I basically create. I create my caption boxes. I create my little style guide, and then from there I make my balloons using Adobe Illustrator. And then at that point, it's just a lot of kerning and trying to make the type fit in the balloons right. This is the only part of making comics I hate. I wish now if I could pay somebody to do this, I would. Just because I just don't like to deal with type all the time. But this kind of type, when it's a lot, I can deal with the design. But this kind of stuff just drives me crazy sometimes. And then this is basically what the comics look like after we add everything. So at this point, my sister has gone through. She's made sure I've got all my spellings and everything correct. And at this point, this is when the page is final, and we can start to put them into the book, or start to put it into like a book form. So what about graphic design? So when it comes to like your comic page layout, your lettering, your comic logos, your book design, marketing, I try to tell a lot of the comic artists that I meet, you probably should brush up on some type and graphic design skills, because if you don't have the time or money and resources to hire somebody, you can learn the principles yourselves, and then you can do a lot of it yourself, like we do at Studio JS. So this is just to turn things over in a different direction for a second. This is the graphic design aspect of the work that I do. And I've just started recently doing this kind of work in the past 2 or 3 years, but companies have just come to me and asked me, can you design a logo? At that point, they give me some ideas. A lot of times companies don't have anything. They just have the name and what they represent. And I kind of have to go from there. So a lot of these logos that I've done in the past couple of years is mainly just me going off of just their name of the company and what they do. The rest,
Are they asking you to do illustration projects too?
only a couple. The one, Barry Good Films, he actually asked me to do the animation to his company that starts before his film. So he did a independent comedy film called Hey Mr. Postman, and he wanted the chair in his logo to collapse while his kids are making fun of it and laughing. So I actually, here we go again, I did it in Photoshop, and the timing was messed up. So I actually ended up animating it in Procreate and then exported it into Photoshop to kind of fine tune the animation process of the chair collapsing. But no, most of them, it's just logo design. A lot of times I'll design the logo, and then maybe a month or two later, a company is recommended to me from somebody else. So that's kind of just basically how we've been surviving off of graphic design. What's next? So cover design is something I take very seriously, and me and my sister, we talk about it a lot. But one of the things that I've noticed with cover design, I go to a lot of conventions and I see a lot of other independent illustrators, and sometimes I just want to talk to them about their covers, because I've seen sometimes where I can't even understand what the cover says because they're not legible. And sometimes I tell people, you want to sell it with your cover. So we're gonna one of the people that I highly recommend to anybody who wants to be an illustrator, comic artist, is Jake Parker. He's the guy that started Inktober. But basically, when it comes to someone who's an illustrator and graphic designer, he's definitely a good example of somebody you could learn a lot from. He's got a phenomenal YouTube channel. He talks about everything from making comics to starting a Kickstarter, breaks down how he did his Kickstarter. Basically, just a real well-rounded artist and illustrator.
This Kickstarter used a lot for getting like a book made.
Oh yeah, he was one of the first people that I got that I learned from when it came to Kickstarter, because I didn't know what Kickstarter was, but he would just put down that he wanted to raise like 7,000, and he ends up raising like 120 something thousand, and he's got all these books that he's made via Kickstarter. I really would like to say that he's one of the people that kind of made it famous for artists. Definitely opened a lot of doors for people that wanted to, get a book printed and get it printed by the fans and not necessarily by like a publisher. And then following suit to him is another group of guys. There's two guys called Creature Box, and I just always loved their graphic design and their aesthetic, because their stuff just it had texture to it. They made stuff look like it was ripped and had tape on it. And I always thought that was very creative when it came to designing something for, something that even kids would want to look at, because a kid would find a cover like this interesting. And I think sometimes just there's a lot of focus on adults, but they kind of opened my mind as far as, the aesthetics of catching somebody's eye. And then here's my first shot at doing a cover. This was a long time ago. I would definitely, now that I look at this cover, it drives me crazy. But, this was the first comic that I had came out with about 10 years ago. And definitely would make a lot of changes. But at that time, I was pretty happy. So for my designs for books, I taught myself how to use Adobe InDesign. And that was not fun, but I did it. Because InDesign is not as cool looking. If you ever opened up InDesign, it does not look as cool as Photoshop or Illustrator. It's like you open it, and you're like, "What is going on?" It's a lot of type, a lot of things for typography, which I'll talk about a little later. But I had no idea. This was a couple years later. I was trying to go with the same, design aesthetic. So this is for a different book, but I kind of felt a little bit different about book design, but I still wanted to keep those same design principles from the previous book. And then this was maybe 2 years ago. This was a book that I did. The cover was in color, and this was the character that we have. So the cover you're looking at right now, this was drawn and painted digitally in Clip Studio. This was until I started using Procreate more for painting. But all of the type work is all done in Adobe InDesign. And I think I even got a document that I could pull up. So this is my latest comic, Jisei. And pretty much the cover is done. I inked it traditionally. I colored it in Photoshop. And this was the first cover is on the left. It's the one that has the brushed in logo. And a lot of people couldn't read what it was saying. So I ended up changing it to the other side where I wanted to make the name more legible.
Does that mean anything in Japanese?
So Jisei means death poem. So basically in a lot of times for like people who were of importance, they would write a death poem before they passed away. Like if they were just dying of an old age, or they wanted to it was kind of like a way to I don't know how to. I'm trying to think of a good way to say it, but it was kind of like a way to bring their thoughts in together before they passed, and they would write it down, and of course somebody would be there so they can transcribe it. But a lot of it was usually poetry. So if you ever read the book Jisei, you'll understand why it's called Jisei or Death Poem. But basically, it's about this character Kana, who is sentenced to a certain death penalty for a crime that he didn't commit. So the story kind of just follows that. And it's basically his death poem because the place that he's sent is basically for him to die. This is the most recent cover that I did for Jisei when I put it on Comixology. So this is the cover that I'm using now. This painting was done all in Procreate.
So how did you why did you get into anime?
Oh, anime. So we talked about this. So for me, anime, I was into anime because of my older brother. My sister and I would, we love watching cartoons because we grew up in the 80s and 90s. And my brother came all dubbed in Japanese, so we never knew what anything anybody was saying.
Can
But
you repeat that last sentence? Your microphone was
oh,
accidentally muted when I muted someone who just came into the room. So
okay.
sorry to interrupt
No,
you.
you're good. Basically, he would bring on VHS tapes with random animes, and would have things like Akira on there, like Fist of the North Star, Vampire Hunter D, and we saw these films and we were just done. At that point, we never looked at animation the same. Like we would look at Disney and be like, "Ah, oh, this is nothing." People like, "Ah, oh, Japanese, they taking it to another level. This is nothing. This is little baby stuff." But nothing against American animation. But we really got, especially me, I got really fond of the aspect to aspect storytelling, which is basically when you go from instead of going from action to action or line to line, you go from kind of like a scene to a different scene. So if you're getting ready to show a mom who's a stay-at-home mom, you'll show her house first in the first camera, and then the next camera might pan to her car. Then the next camera would be her in the kitchen, and then the next camera would be like the kids coming down the steps. And I was really fond of that way of storytelling. And you see a lot of that in Hayao Miyazaki films. And you see a lot of that in a director that I like, Mamoru Oshii, who does Ghost in the Shell and a film called, all these. Some people call it Wolf's Rain, but the Japanese call it Jinro. But those are phenomenal films that do a lot of aspect to aspect storytelling. Trying to think of what else. I don't know if we did. Anybody have any questions? Because I'm kind of like speeding through this. Let me see.
So, are there any American films that do aspect to aspect? Like, that's something I didn't know about. Like, it was in your meeting description, but I didn't know I just left it there because I didn't know if it was a typo or what that was exactly.
No, one that I can think of recently, not too recently, that I saw some usage of it is Christopher Nolan. He tends to do it sometimes. Mainly the scene in the beginning of The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger. The whole scene of the school buses and him robbing the bank. A lot of that was it wasn't necessarily just action to action. They kind of built the whole film, and you kind of got in the environment of the film first, and then they started to show you who everyone was and how the movies played out. You don't see it too much though that I've seen in American films, but I have to be honest with you, I don't watch too many. I haven't watched too many. I've been really into like watching old school samurai films from like the 1950s, like Akira Kurosawa films, just so I can tell some stories a little bit different. So unfortunately, I don't know too many American.
Are those on Netflix, or where would you watch those if someone wanted to watch them?
So Akira Kurosawa, the Criterion collection is a good place to start. Criterion that now they have an app, so you can pay the subscription like everybody has now, and then you can watch mostly his whole catalog. I'm trying to think of another. There's another samurai film called Zatoichi that I'm a big fan of. Um, I'm trying to think of any other ones. I'm really fond of the Ip Man series with Donnie Yen. I think that's a phenomenal film series.
I know there's a
Sorry.
couple, like I think Chris Suster likes like the anime, and Jerry Shamry has a million films, like, so they're all probably nodding their heads at those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm big into that kind of stuff. So that definitely has helped push me on as far as drawing and my artwork. And then a lot of times me and my sister will trade films and be like, oh, did you see this? Did you see that? And I'm also big into horror, but not all horror films. I kind of like horror films made in the 80s and the 70s, not so much movies in the 2000s and the later eras.
Oh, I won't watch those.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And
All
here's
right.
a. It's okay. I'm trying to think of I can't think of a horror movie that I saw recently that I was like, I'm a little excited about. I'm excited about the Candyman. I still don't know why people play around and say that. I don't even joke around and say the Candyman's name, but I'm very excited to see what Jordan Peele and his and the I don't think he's the director, but I'm excited to see what direction it takes this time with a fresh with a fresh brain and thought process. Here's my sister's comic, The Bitter Beans. So my sister's starting to get a bit into design too. So she likes to make comics that are funny based on like experiences she has. My sister's a coffee drinker. I'm not. I love tea. So my sister goes to the Cocoa. I forgot what it's called. It's Cocoa Bakery, or that's one of her places to go off of Payne, I believe. It's a Korean. I believe they sell a lot of. I've only went there once, and it was jam packed. But she's made a lot of stories based on just her experiences going to coffee shops, stuff like that. And people love her stories. I love her stories because they make me laugh. My stuff's a little bit more serious, so it's refreshing to always see Michelle's work. It's a little bit lighter. We also do prints every now and then. I don't usually like to do these kind of things, but it helps when movies come out. I'm a big fan of the Mandalorian series. My kids love that series. We're also big Zelda fans, and we like Link. My kids really love Link. But we also sell prints, and a lot of my ideas for prints, I see what's going on and what's popular, and then I'll draw it. And like I said, I'll try to also put some of my graphic design elements in there, as far as using the names and putting my logo on the bottom of it. These are my sisters. We were gonna create a clothing line, and we were coming up with ideas, and my sister was coming up with a lot of concepts with the girls wearing hoodies and things like that for winter wear. And a lot of times my sister will send me her her drawings or illustrations, and I'll usually add the type or the graphic design elements to it. A lot of times she just likes to just illustrate them. She always says she wants to get into it, but sometimes we're just pressed for time. Let's see what else we got here. So in terms of like marketing, I've been finding new ways to kind of get my stuff seen a bit differently. So I sell my books digitally, and one of the places that we decided to start selling them is on Gumroad. And Gumroad basically makes it flawless. It's a flawless experience when you're putting it online, because once you put it online, you type in your price and all that kind of stuff, and at that point you can sell it. Another thing about Gumroad is that it's a haven for tutorials. So if you want to learn something as far as how to draw and Procreate, or use programs like Clip Studio and like a lot of the iPad programs or the apps, Gumroad is a good place to start. They have tutorials on everything from composition to storyboarding to graphic. It's crazy.
Are they selling the tutorials then? Like they're a couple bucks, or are they free to get people to
Some
put
of them
them
are,
on the website?
yeah, most of them, believe it or not, aren't that expensive at all. The most I've ever spent maybe was $15, but usually they're in the $8 range. But a lot of tutorials I got were from people who were like from Disney, people who had worked at Disney, were storyboard artists, or people who were designers. And, I just wanted to have like a one up on something. So I'll buy a class from there. And then once I found out that I could sell comics on there, it's been great. Funny thing is that I tried to do a Kickstarter last year. We didn't raise enough money. I went through my numbers and I kind of asked for too much. And now that I know that, I would do it a bit differently. But once I went on the Kickstarter and said, hey, this didn't work out. If you go to my Gumroad store, I've got physical copies of the books just in case you still want like the small mini comics of it that we sold. And I sold out. I was done. I sold out in about a week. And Gumroad was easy. Their address was in there. All I had to do was print off their address and stick it on the envelope, put the comic in there, and we were good to go.
What kind of percentage of cut do they take of your sales?
It's small. It's something that I didn't even notice. I think it's like it's not a lot at all. It's a lot easier for something like instead of trying to do a store using like Shopify, because or Big Cartel's a good one too. I'm not going to say they're not the Gumroad's the best. Big Cartel's a good one too, especially if you're just starting out. Because I've even seen people sell their services sometimes on like Gumroad. Like you can hire them using one of the little the prompts or links that they have there. So this is just like another version of how we try to market our books. I made this a couple months ago because I was thinking about doing another Kickstarter later in the summer, but that was before the pandemic has surfaced and kind of taken over the world right now. So I don't know if I'm gonna follow through. I might try something different. But this was basically a graphic that I had made. I used Adobe InDesign. I used Photoshop and Adobe InDesign. And there's a site that you can go to get these little mock-ups called CoverVault, covervault.com. And basically he makes these little mock-ups of the books and you can put in your designs. And then I used InDesign to add the rest of the type to the ad. And then here's another example of how we try to, I put these on Instagram. So the longer one is what you would use for your story, for your Instagram stories, and those are just the little 15-second clips. And then the square ones, of course, are the square Instagram format that you would use. And this is where I can use my type abilities because I'll go in with Adobe InDesign and I'll put in my images and then I'll start adding my type using InDesign.
I heard a podcast where they were interviewing a comic book artist and he put some of his comics on Instagram and he makes each of the pictures like a panel and then he puts the arrows on there so people know to click on it to go to the next panel for the story. Does that work? Have you done that?
It does. I've done it a couple times. I like it. The only thing is that, you kind of have to get creative because it is that perfect square. They did change it recently. I think you can swipe with the landscape format. I'm not sure. I have to double check on that. But I know for sure, yes, you're right. I've seen a lot of people do it. A lot of people use it for gags, which to me it's good for using, like if you have a gag comic. If the comics I use, they don't work too well with that format because it's that you got to fit everything in that square. But yes, I do recommend that for people who want to make gags and want to get their work known and develop a fan base. That's an excellent way to go.
Okay. Now, what about do you have printed books too?
We do. We're almost running out. I think I still got a couple more of, actually, let me see if I can pull up my Gumroad here. Let me see if I can pull up my our Gumroad page. Give me a second. Had it pulled up, but I must have closed out on it accidentally.
So Gumroad actually they send out the printed ones?
No, that's basically all us. So
Oh, all
you'll,
right.
you'll basically just get the order for it, and then at that point we'll go in and so this is what it would look like. So this is what the Gumroad store looks like. Um, all these are pretty much digital, except this one right here. So this one I still have, and I still have these in print, but I don't sell these. I just pass these out at conventions because these aren't characters I own. These are just little, short story fan comics that I did just for fun. And a lot of times these are just conversation starters and also a way for kids because these are kids safe, so kids can come up and just take a comic. A lot of times kids don't have money, so they'll just come up and be wanting to talk, and you're like, take a comic. And I'll also sell this one for free too. I've been passing that out just because a lot of kids like to read it. But these, I haven't printed these yet. I'm kind of holding off. Unfortunately, this COVID-19 has stopped a lot of my plans for now, so we're going to have to reset a little bit as far as what we're going to do with the comics. But trying to think if that's where we hit. And I think that was my last slide.
Okay. So I'm not really sure how to do the question. I don't know whether it's going to be chaos or whether it will be okay for how the questions will be working. So I guess why don't you stop your screen share?
Okay.
And I guess I'll unmute the mics and we'll see. And I guess if I have to do it one by one or manage that, I will. But let's just see how it goes. Since I haven't done this before. So does someone have a question that they can maybe text it, and we'll let Miguel answer that?
Oh, I think we're good. I did phenomenal. Yes.
So, all right, here's one. Do you find your fans, where'd it go? Do you find your fans are more interested in your imagery or your story?
Both actually. It's funny, you don't realize how many people are reading your comic until like people come up to you and you're talking about it and you're like, oh wow, you read it, like yay. But it's been really cool developing. I try not to use the word fans. I kind of see them as friends because they're a patron and they're helping you achieve a certain level of success. But it's really refreshing, and a lot of times they can be very reassuring. A lot of them are very positive. It's funny now because now when we do shows, it's we'll go to different places and we'll see people from the same shows and they're like, oh hey, I remember you guys, and now we're getting to know people by name now, so that's pretty cool to develop that. But a lot of people just like the imagery we have. They always comment that it's positive, especially a lot of the stuff that my sister does too. The kids love her stuff because she makes a lot of the cute stuff. Oh wow! Oh yeah, we are getting questions.
So we're getting, yeah, we are getting. So yeah, I wanted to not just have like a pause right there at the end.
It says, what percentage of your business is anime versus graphic design? They're kind of neck and neck now. I will say that. A lot of people have been asking me about storyboarding in the past. I would say in the past 6 months. A lot of people have been asking about storyboarding, if I've been interested in storyboarding. I've even been asked to work on a film. Can't talk about it because I'm pretty sure it's canceled from the last thing I think it's canceled or it's just postponed. But yeah, that was the last thing they told me in the meeting. You can't speak about this. I'm like, oh great. So I can't even talk about it. But yeah, it's kind of neck and neck now. I'm hoping at one point it will be a lot more storyboarding and anime based. Not that I don't like graphic design, but I love drawing more so. So that's a good question.
When you do your aspect, that part of anime, do you use that in your graphic design too when you're like doing any kind of advertising or marketing?
Yes. So when I made like a video for the G-Stick Kickstarter campaign, it was a lot of shots to build up like the scene and the feel of it. But I mostly use it just in my drawing. I haven't really had an opportunity to do it for graphic design, but that's a good question too.
Right, so that was my question. So here's Chris Suster's question. Did you grow up watching anime? What comics did you read as a kid?
Oh yeah.
It was Ms.
Miyazaki.
an influence, Astro Boy, others.
Yes, I did grow up watching anime. A lot of it. My brother gave us a lot of anime. A lot of it was not appropriate, but a lot of it was not appropriate, but we watched it. And I looked at it from a different steps. I knew I was seeing something different because my friends would comment if they saw a movie or they were somebody they saw, and I would be like, nah, that's not what I paid attention to. But yes, as far as Miyazaki, oh yes, very definitely an influence. Comics I grew up reading as a kid: Spawn, Spider-Man. I'm trying to think of what else. As a teenager, was like Battle Chasers, Blade of the Immortals. Always been one of my favorite series. And I'm trying to think because a lot of them are on my wall. Akira, and I think. A whole bunch of them, mainly Spawn though. I was a huge Spawn fan. Let me see. Can you find it? You don't know. Oh, people talking about chatting. How much time do you put into completing a book? Oh, so once I get done with thumbnailing and roughing, the ink work is the fastest part. It usually takes me, if I'm working on a 28-page comic book like G-Say, to finish it from start to finish would probably take about 3 months. It could probably go a lot faster than that, but because of my having family and that kind of thing, and usually I'm working on G-Say while I'm working on somebody else's project. So G-Say is usually something I work on at night or in my free time. But if without restrictions, it'd probably take me about a month, 2 months. 2 months. I'm trying to think of what other questions.
There's a few there. There's let's see. How old were you when you started your interest in Asian culture?
Oh, ever since I was a kid. So I remember I was always into martial arts. I am a martial artist, so I practice martial arts now. When it comes to, let me see, Asian culture, yeah, I've been in it since when I was a kid. I remember when my dad brought home the stack of VHS tapes, and I was like, what is this? It was this big box, and I opened up the box, and it was Bruce Lee. And I was like, oh, so we put Bruce Lee on, and after that, I was done. I even modeled myself walking like Bruce Lee because I was a skinny kid. So that was my way of letting bullies, I'll give you that business if you want to fight. So everybody would always tell me like, you walk like this. So yeah, no, I've always been in the.
Have you been to Japan?
No, I want to go though. I've always wanted to go, and every time I want to go, there's something that happens. And once again, this was one of those things. This was one of those years where I was ready to go and had the money for the ticket. And now my cousin, he works for the military. He lives there, and I don't even think I would be allowed to stay with him because of this whole situation. So I'm just gonna have to wait. But yes, I love Asian culture. It's particularly Japanese culture, and very fond of the samurai. Let me see.
Okay, so here's some questions from Christine. So you storyboard before writing the dialogue, not the other way around?
Yeah. Yes.
Because you're more visual?
Yes, I'm a more visual person. Another person that I thought I was weird until I saw a documentary of one of my kids. I saw a documentary on Hayao Miyazaki, and he storyboards first. He goes through and he'll sit at his desk and he'll look up in the sky and come up with his whole series. I forgot the name of it, but I think it's something called A Man with No Name or something like that. But it's a documentary that's on like the Asian International Channel, and you can watch it on Hayao Miyazaki, and it actually follows him while he's making the animation called Ponyo. So yes, I'm definitely a visual person.
All right, and there's a question from Henry and from Victor. So
Okay.
Let's just do a couple more.
Okay. Let's see, Christine. Which one? So Henry, so Ty McFarlane's big influence on you then. Yeah, Todd McFarlane mainly because he gave up on the Marvel industry and decided to do his own thing. So a lot of comic book artists were very like, that's the route you should go. Now I'm more so influenced by artistry wise Kim Jung-gi because he draws without using any penciling. He just draws using a brush pen. They give him a paper, they put it on the wall, and he literally will draw a whole scene from that point. Another person is Jake Parker. There's an artist that I know of that lives in Florida that I'm friends with named Amliv. She does these wonderful penciled graphite drawings that I don't have the patience or time to do. So I'm always just amazed by that. I'm amazed by my sister, just because of the stuff she can make in clay, and my brother Bruce, who makes music, my good friend Seneca, who makes music. A lot of people from Cleveland I'm influenced by, believe it or not. And I'll try to go to another question. What's another one? Do you consider placement of text as you're illustrating? Oh yeah. I didn't consider that at first. That's why I always tell children and people who want to get into comics, think about where you want to put your balloons, your speech balloons in your comics as you're drawing it. Don't put that in at the last minute. Don't try to squeeze in dialogue at the last minute. You're going to have that's a serious headache. Yeah, try to always implement that first. Leave those spaces empty for a purpose. That's where you're going to put your dialogue, because that's a mistake I've made countless times, especially when I first started. Yeah.
So I actually have, I don't know, I guess this actually is a question for somebody that's in the audience or participants, is like, I guess for like, Emily Anchorage is here, and her son worked at Pixar and won some Academy Awards.
Oh.
So I guess, Emily, did your son read anime comics when he was a kid, or do you read those yourself? Because I saw you nodding when you talked about some of the directors. So I'll unmute you.
I've read anime comic books, yes.
And
I do not know whether Lee looked at anime comic books. The one Japanese director that you talked about is one of his favorite people. I can't think of his name right now.
Miyazaki? Is it Miyazaki?
Yeah, I think so.
Miyazaki, okay.
The premier anime filmmaker, right?
Yes, phenomenal. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you. All right, so
Thank you.
I guess I would like to wrap up with a thank you, and then I have a poll. So, like, for meeting feedback, so I'm going to do another poll. But I know you can like clap, or there's like a thing for reaction. So I'd like to thank Miguel for presenting tonight. Thank you very much, Miguel. So let's see, we can do the applause. But